Hi, everyone. It's me, Tim. So, you want to make games. Today, I want to answer a question from Zacking Tut, who asks I was wondering if you could do a video about things to consider if you're thinking about getting into the gaming industry. Um, this is kind of a big question. The first thing I want to do is say that to answer this question is really me asking you a bunch of questions. It's a lot of questions that only you, each individual watching this, can answer. I'm going to break it down into two categories. First, I think you need to ask yourself if you even want to go into the game industry. I've got a bunch of things on that. Then you want to ask yourself, okay, if I do want to go in the game industry, what part of the gaming industry do I want to be in? It's a big industry. I've told you it's bigger than Hollywood. It's bigger than the movie industry. It's one of the biggest industries on the planet. So you can't just go, I want to be in the gaming industry. You really got to know what you want to do. So let's talk about the first group of questions first, which is whether or not you even want to do it. I'll rip the band-aid off right away and go, hey, so you like video games? So you have a lot of good ideas on video games? That's not enough. Just rip the band-aid off now. I've got a whole video called, let's talk about game ideas or whatever. I'll link it below. It's not enough. We all have good ideas. Almost everybody gets in the game industry because they like video games and they have good ideas about video games. This in no way makes you special. This in no way will get you noticed. It will in no way differentiate you from any of the other millions of people who want to go in the game industry. So I had to rip that band-aid off right away because I still have people go, I had this great idea. I wonder if you could look at it. No. Also, no one wants to see your ideas. Not because they may not be interested in them, because I can't contract at other game companies and look at game ideas that you have, whether it's a demo, whether it's a tabletop set of rules, whether it's something you did as a class project. I can't look at it because if what you show me looks similar to what we're doing in this game, I don't want to risk a client getting sued because you can prove you showed me a feature and 2 years later it came out in a game I was working on. So it's more than no one cares that you have any ideas. It's no one wants to even risk seeing them. So there, that band-aid has been ripped right off. Second question is, what skills do you have that are wanted by the game industry? Can you code? Can you write well? Can you do good art? Are you disciplined in estimation and scheduling? Do you stay on top of things? Are you really organized? Do you speak another language? These are all things that can get you roles in the game industry. If you don't have any of those, are you willing to learn one or more of them? Because you're going to need to. And then the question is, are you going to teach yourself in a way that you can demonstrate when you interview, like a demo, or, hey, I'm fluent in this other language. Let's talk in it for 5 minutes. Or are you going to go to school? And I have a whole video on school versus self-taught. That's a whole thing. And it's really more dependent on you. I don't think school or self-taught is necessarily there's a best decision there. It's really highly dependent on you. So I'd watch that video. One thing you also want to ask yourself, and this is in a very personal question, is are you okay with your hobby turning into your job or career or calling? Because you might not be. I know people who love certain things so much they can't do it as their job because it would ruin it. Once they have to do that thing to make a living, it ruins it as their, private loved hobby. And guess what? Maybe just being a game development hobbyist is perfect for you. You have ideas. You grab an engine, one of the many free engines that's appropriate to make that idea, whether it's a side scroller or a puzzle game or a 3D game, and you make it. And you get it off your chest and you're like, phew, I will never have to think about that again. I'm glad I did that. That was fun. Now I'm going to go on and do other things like watch birds or collect butterflies. Whatever your hobby is, it's okay to just keep game making as a hobby. And it's entirely up to you. And then the last one you will have to ask yourself a series of personal questions that, again, only you can answer, and you have to be honest. If you answer any of these dishonestly to yourself, you're already going to make yourself angry in a few years. And these are the kind of questions you need to ask. What kind of person are you? Do you like working by yourself or in a team? Are you communicative or quiet? Do you have a strong point of view, or are you just kind of person who go with the flow? These are the kind of questions you should ask yourself, because it will tell you, if you still are positive you want in the game industry, it will tell you what part of the industry you may be most appropriate for. So let's transition to that other half. So I've told you everything I just talked about is, should you even consider getting into the game industry? If you think the answer to that is yes, now the next big question you need to ask yourself is, what part? It is a huge industry. And before we even talk about being in the industry, there's a lot of game development adjacent jobs you could do. You could go into journalism and write about the industry. You could become a reviewer and play games and give feedback. That's really good stuff. One of my favorite channels, Mortismal Gaming, that's what he does. And he's really good at it. Can you do that? Maybe you can. Maybe that's what you'd rather do. You could also become an industry pundit. That's my job. Don't you do that. It's taken. No, I'm sure that a lot of you could do a lot better talking about the industry without being in it. All my stories are, through my lens of I've been in it for so long and it's the only thing I've ever done. Maybe you want to be a pundit and talk about the game industry without being in it. I don't know what that road would look like, but it may be your road. Now let's decide you want to be in the industry. Big question you have to ask yourself. Do you want to be indie or go the publishing route? I can't answer that for you. I've never been indie. As many people like to point out here, I will tell stories and anecdotes and amusing, portions of my game development life. And one of the first comments people make is, well, Tim, that's not how it works in indie. You may be right. I have no idea how indie works. I've never done an indie game. I've never been in the indie part of the industry. But that may be something you want to look at. That may fit you very well. Being your own boss, setting your own timetable, doing it all at your own pace. That may be perfect for you. If you choose not to go indie, keep in mind you're giving up something in all of those categories. Someone else will tell you how fast to work. Someone else is paying you. Someone else is setting the timetable. You don't like that? Go indie. Then you have to decide, okay, if you're not going to go indie, do you want to work at big companies or small companies? I preferred smaller ones. I worked at some small ones that became big ones. I worked at some small ones that were part of big ones. But you will have to decide that, because big companies and small companies do very different kinds of games. Some games you may want to do can only really be done at a big company, although maybe AI will change that. Maybe AI will let smaller companies make these big, what we call now AAA games. But depending on what you want to do, that may be decided for you. If the only game you can make can be made on a team of 100 or 200 people, well, guess what? You're going to go work at a bigger company. The next big question, which is very difficult to answer, is what role do you want? Let's say you've decided, I want to be in the game industry. It's perfect for me. I don't want to do it as a hobby. I want to work at a studio that isn't indie, so I know I'm going to have to be put in a role somewhere. What do you want to do? Do you want to do art? What kind of art? 2D, 3D, concept? You want to be a programmer? Maybe what kind of programmer? Gameplay, AI, network, graphics. Do you want to do design? What kind of design? System, level, narrative? Do you want to do QA? Do you want to do music? Do you want to do production? Do you want to do localization? Do you want to do marketing? There are so many choices in front of you. And that, again, you want to ask yourself not only what you're good at, but what you're going to like doing and what you're willing to make your job and not just something that you enjoy. You may want to also ask yourself, how much responsibility and authority do I want? And I've talked about this a little in videos here and there. I'm not even sure which one to reference. But I've worked with many people who, they don't want authority. They don't want responsibility. When they move up the chain, they stop at staff or senior level. They don't want to be a lead. They don't want to be a director. And that's fine. You basically have to ask yourself, do I want to make the big decisions? And then be responsible for them. Some people want to be part of the decision-making process, but they don't want to be responsible for the decision being made. And that's okay, as long as you understand that if you're just part of the decision, but you don't want the responsibility, then it really isn't your decision. And therefore, you can't complain too much when decisions are made that aren't what you wanted. There's only a certain, you can complain a little, but there's a cap to how much you can complain if you aren't willing to make those decisions and take some responsibility for them. It's basically you're just being an armchair quarterback at that point. Now, for a lot of people, that's great. They find a role, they like doing that role, they like doing art, they like doing narrative design, they like doing gameplay programming. Maybe they even like it more specific. Maybe they like writing companion characters. Maybe they like writing code for guns. Maybe they like doing, texture art that gets applied to different models. That's great. And that if you want a very specific role like that and you're just happy doing it, that's fine. Just be aware that you've self-limited your authority on the project. There's only so much you can, I demand that this project be done this way, if you're going to self-limit yourself that way. And then the final question you have to ask yourself if you've decided to go in the industry is, okay, you maybe you know what role you want, what kind of company you want to work at. Well, how much do you care about things like the game's genre, the game setting, the age group the games are made for? Because this will narrow down what company you can work at, what role you can do in that company, and maybe even what project. Because I've seen all these happen. I've worked at companies like Troika. I owned Troika, or Obsidian, that primarily do role-playing games. Yes, there are other things you can do there, but if you work there, you're probably going to end up working on a role-playing game. Then there are companies that do very specific settings. If you work at, a company known for making 3 big games and they're in particular settings, I hope you like at least one of those settings because that's what you're going to work in. And then the age group is also true. Some companies make very adult M-rated games. If you worked at Obsidian, you had to be aware that many of their games were rated T and M. And even, in fact, South Park, that was a very adult-oriented game. You have to know what you want. And that's more of a question of what are you comfortable doing? It's less of are you interested in this and are you comfortable doing this? And that's a question only you can answer. So, that's a lot of questions I just shot back at you, Zacking Tut, for asking a question. But I hope this gave you things to think about, which is what you said, things to consider if you're thinking about getting into the game industry.